Hello everyone, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching and or listening to this episode of Ages of Empires, where we will be going through all the major world empires throughout history. As mentioned, we use this term empires quite loosely. However, if one is curious to learn more about empires specifically as sort of as an idea, I recommend Michael Doyle's book Empires, where it talks about the metropole and the periphery, etc. But nonetheless, we use this term broadly, just basically essentially the largest states, to have everything that makes the list. Nonetheless, in this episode we will be covering the Rozvi Empire and the Maratha Confederation. So these are two very unique empires. It seems like, at least in my education growing up, there was perhaps maybe a bias even to Greek city-states, whereas the Greek city-states, none of them are even close in size to many of the empires that we included in this list. So nonetheless, we had to squeeze in the Greek city-states and perhaps they're even overstated, but then again they have perhaps more writing about them. But nonetheless, this Rozvi Empire is from Zimbabwe and also a bit in Mozambique, and the Maratha Confederation was in India, and these are two very large empires as well, or at least in terms of all states throughout history. And as well, from each empire we will highlight a specific leader. So from the Rozvi Empire we will highlight Changamire Dombo the First, and from the Maratha Confederation we will highlight Shivaji the First. And at the end we will have a comparison between the two leaders to learn a little bit more about them through their differences in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, where he has a comparison between each ancient Greek and ancient Rome leader, and then hopefully we'll learn a bit more about their two respective empires as well. So let's begin with the first empire. So the Rozvi Empire, also known as the Rozwi, not with a V, with a W sometimes, empire, was a powerful pre-colonial state in what is now Zimbabwe in Africa, and parts of central Mozambique as well, as mentioned. Its history is marked by a dynamic rise under a strong leadership, territorial expansion, and eventual decline due to internal and external pressures, as we shall see. So the Rozvi Empire, for some further background information, existed from as early as 1500 CE, but official start date we will attribute as 1660 CE, and concluded in 1866 CE, and it was a Shona state established by on the Zimbabwean plateau by Changamire Dombo. So that's the leader we'll highlight in a specific biography as well. The term Rozvi refers to their legacy as a warrior nation, and it was taken from the Shona word Kurozva, which means to plunder, and they became the most powerful fighting force in the whole of Zimbabwe at their time. So as for the origins and rise, the formation and early leadership, so the Rozvi Empire emerged in the late 17th century under the Changamire Dombo, a military leader and the founder of the Rozvi dynasty. The Rozvi people were a branch of the Karanga, who themselves were part of the larger Shona ethnic group. The empire's formation was a response to the decline of the Mutapa Empire, which had dominated the region. As for the military prowess and expansion after this formation, after sort of eclipsing or overcoming the Mutapa Empire as the most powerful warrior-like state in the region. As for the military prowess and expansion, so Changamire Dombo's military skills were crucial in consolidating the state's early power. He successfully rebelled against the Portuguese, we've highlighted the Portuguese colonial empire, who had been asserting control over parts of the interior through trade and military outposts. In 1684, the Rozvi decisively defeated the Portuguese at the Battle of Mongue, expelling them from the interior and ending their influence over the region. Furthermore, under Changamire Dombo, the Rozvi Empire expanded their territory significantly. They established a centralized state and with a well-organized military known for its use of the nguni, which is a fighting technique which involves cowhide shields and short stabbing spears. So, as we might think, quite a modern fighting tactic today, a shield and a short sword, but nonetheless this was quite revolutionary at the time and in this region. The empire's influence extended, and also the materials and the specific length. There's a lot more depth than just having a sword and a shield. The specific length and the specific style, the weight of it was also tactfully advantaged, even when they did have sword and shield necessarily before. The empire's influence extended over the central plateau of Zimbabwe, reaching into parts of modern-day Mozambique. As for the Golden Age, so the political and economic structure at this time, so at its height, the Rozvi Empire was a well-organized state with a hierarchical political structure. The king, or Mambo, held supreme power, supported by a council of nobles and regional governors. The empire's economy was based on agriculture and cattle herding and trade, so both able to have animal husbandry, take care of cattle, but also agriculture as well, and also crops such as millet. Rozvi were skilled farmers cultivating crops such as millet, sorghum, and maize, and they engaged in extensive cattle breeding as well, so having a somewhat diverse economy, at least in terms of food, at its zenith. The empire also engaged in trade with neighboring states and coastal traders, also a tactic in terms of military. If one is a trading partner, they're less likely to go to war. Gold mining and trade were significant, and the Rozvi exchanged gold, ivory, and other goods for luxury items and necessities such as cloth and beads for the Portuguese and other traders, so engaging with the Portuguese that had formerly had already begun colonizing the region, and now they were engaging in trade, which might be a way to at least prevent too much conflict. As for their cultural achievements, so the Rozvi Empire is noted for its contributions to the region's culture and architecture. They built impressive stone structures, continuing the stone buildings tradition of their predecessors, the great builders of the Great Zimbabwe. These included fortified settlements and elaborate stone enclosures, as we shall see in the images to come. The empire also fostered music, dance, and craftsmanship through a rich cultural heritage with a vibrant tradition of oral literature, music, dance, and craftsmanship. So not only strong economy, strong in trade, strong in military, but also strong in arts. Often these things do come hand in hand, but we have seen many exceptions. As for the fall and decline, however, of this empire, which inevitably comes to all empires, so starting with internal strife and succession issues. So the decline of the Rozvi Empire began in the 19th century due to a combination of internal and external factors. Succession disputes and internal strife weakened the central authority as well, so often there's these internal factors that make the external factors worse, and succession disputes are very, very common. So perhaps if it's a hereditary monarchy or even an elective monarchy, eventually over time, perhaps some succession disputes are inevitable. So the question is, will it ultimately lead to the destruction of the state? As in many cases it has, perhaps in this one as well, particularly. Succession disputes and internal strife weakened the central authority, and as the empire expanded, it became increasingly difficult to maintain control over distant territories, leading to fragmentation and local leaders asserting greater autonomy, so perhaps overextension as well. Or perhaps they needed a different style of governing system, such as, for example, the satrapies, as we saw earlier in the Persian empires, which has influenced many governor-like structures as we see today. Governor would be the United States equivalent, or in Canada we have premiers, for example, so essentially provincial or state leaders too, which is a form of central control if they're aligned with the federal government or the empire. As for external pressures, which sort of took advantage of these internal pressures, so external pressures also played a significant role in the empire's decline. The rise of the Zulu Empire, very famous empire in this region under Shaka Zulu in the early 19th century, had a ripple effect across southern Africa, leading to a period of widespread conflict and migration known as the Methane, I hope, or Methane. Pardon, I hope my pronunciation is correct, but I'm trying to do phonetical as well. Methane. This period saw many Nguni speaker groups moving northward, bringing conflict and disruption to the Rozvi Empire. So this big migration period was a significant external effect as well. As for the mid-19th century, the Ndebele people, under the leadership of Mzilikazi, invaded the Rozvi territory, and the Ndebele, fleeing the Zulu expansion as well, were a formidable military force. So these other states that are also fearing this Zulu forces are also coming into conflict with them. The defeat of the Ndebele people marked the effective end of the Rozvi Empire as a political entity as well. So this is very significant external factors, and maybe the internal factors were even caused by these external factors, and perhaps these succession disputes were because they were having difficulties dealing with these. So as for the legacy, despite the fall, the legacy of the Rozvi Empire endured. The Rozvi played a crucial role in shaping the cultural and political landscape of the region even till this day. Their resistance against the Portuguese colonization efforts delayed European influence in the interior of southern Africa, allowing local cultures to flourish relatively independently for longer than other regions in Africa, as we have seen in Chelsea. As for the Rozvi architectural achievements as well, architectural practices, agricultural practices, and military strategies influenced subsequent generations. Today, the history of the Rozvi Empire is an essential part of the cultural heritage of Zimbabwe and the broader southern African region. So very, very unique empire, as we shall discuss more after discussing the specific leader, so the founder, Changamire Dombo. So the most important ruler perhaps of the Rozvi Empire was Changamire Dombo, the founder of and first king of the Rozvi Empire. His life and reign were instrumental in shaping the history of Rozvi and the broader region of southern Africa. Therefore, we will seek to find a biography of his life, but first for some further background information. So he is the Changamire dynasty, named after him, as he is the founder of the Changamire dynasty. He was, however, a lowly son of Matope, the ruler of Mabir, or Momotapa, the Momotapa Empire, who appointed him as governor or its central southern provinces, but he declared his independence of Matope's successors and founded the kingdom he called Rozvi, or Rozwi, so perhaps it was even a succession dispute that founded the empire, which would ultimately lead to its decline, so maybe it was sort of foreshadowing what would become of the empire, as he was sort of he created the empire rather than many of the other leaders that we've highlighted, where they've perhaps been first in line, some have been second in line, some have been third in line, some have not even been in the question. Here, as far as we know, he is a lowly son, so he's a governor. He certainly wasn't firstly in line, or at least the favored. As for his early life and background, so Changamire Dombo was born in the mid-17th century, likely in the region that is now Zimbabwe. He belonged to the Karanga, a subgroup of the Shona people. The exact details, however, of his early life are sparse, but it is known that he rose to prominence as a military leader during political fragmentation and conflict, and even perhaps taking the throne from his father against his father's choice. As for his rise to power, so in the late 17th century, the once powerful Mutapa Empire was in decline, providing an opportunity for ambitious leaders like Changamire Dombo. He initially served as regional chieftain within the Mutapa region, but soon broke away to establish his own independent state. So many empires have been created by things uniting. Some have been internal, but some have also been through a spin-off, as this is sort of a split-off. He started as a governor, but then he would go back and take many of the other regions. So that's for his establishment of the Rozvi Empire. Around 1684, Changamire Dombo led a successful rebellion against the Portuguese, who had been exerting control over parts of the interior of southern Africa. His decisive victory at the Battle of Maungwe was a turning point, expelling the Portuguese from the region and ending the attempts to dominate the inland territories. Following the victory, Changamire Dombo established the Rozvi Empire, unifying the Shona-speaking groups under his leadership. So once again, sort of a Genghis Khan-like figure, or many even earlier nomadic leaders, uniting different groups but also specifically Shona people as well. So a uniting figure. As for his military and political achievements, so Changamire Dombo was a brilliant military strategist, as we've seen in his successes, and firstly getting his autonomy and against the Portuguese, and a shrewd politician, however, as well. His leadership saw the expansion of the Rozvi Empire's territory, which came to encompass what is now Zimbabwe and parts of central Mozambique as well. The Rozvi military was well organized and known for its use of the Nguni fighting techniques, including the use of cow-high shields and short stabbing spears, as mentioned. As for centralization and administration, under Changamire Dombo, the Rozvi Empire developed a centralized administrative structure. He appointed regional governors to oversee different parts of the empire, ensuring loyalty through a combination of military might and diplomatic marriages. So, as many of our leaders, for example, even on our most recent episode, so 61, there was a marriage which one of the leaders had many wives and one had only one wife. But nonetheless, this was, some do it through love, some do it through military tactics. In this case, we have plural, that Changamire Dombo married multiple marriages for political endeavors. So sort of maybe on the further end of the spectrum in terms of more proliferate. Well, not necessarily in children, but at least in terms of marriages, as we have in data. Therefore, the centralized state allowed for efficient tax collection, and because there's tax collection, that also means there must be private enterprise as well, law enforcement and the mobilization of resources. As for his cultural contributions, Changamire Dombo's reign also saw significant cultural development. The Rozvi continued to build their stone building traditions of their ancestors, also showing a surplus of calories to even be able to build such things, constructing impressive stone enclosures and settlements. The empire fostered a rich cultural life, including oral literature, music, and craftsmanship. As for his later years and legacy, Changamire Dombo ruled the Rozvi Empire until his death in the early 18th century. His successors continued to build on his achievements, maintaining the empire's power and influence for several decades. However, internal strife and external pressures eventually led to the empire's decline in the 19th century, as we have seen. As for his enduring influence, Changamire Dombo's legacy endures in the cultural and historical consciousness of the Zimbabwe and Southern Africa. The Zimbabwe people, he is remembered as a unifying leader who resisted foreign domination and established a powerful state that left a lasting impact on the region. The term Changamire itself has become a symbol of resistance and leadership in the Shona history, so it's even a revered title, Changamire. Today, the story of Changamire Dombo and the Rozvi Empire is celebrated as an essential part of Zimbabwe's heritage, reflecting the resilience and ingenuity of the Shona people in face of external challenges and internal challenges as well. So as for the content of the slide of this fascinating empire and leader, I would say, in my opinion at least, the title is Changamire Dombo and the Rozvi Empire. It's a Shona state established on the Zimbabwean plateau. Rozvi, the title, the name, refers to the legacy as a warrior nation from the Shona term kurozva, which means to plunder. The significant leader was Changamire I, or Changamire Dombo. The empire was the Rozvi Empire. The period is from 1660 to 1866 CE. The modern location is Zimbabwe and Mozambique as well. The million square kilometers would be 0.624, which is smaller than our average largest empire, but we only included the largest on the list, and still, it's a very populated and warlike region. There had been empires existing in this region as well. So, and there was established settlements and forts and agriculture. So, my point is, not 1 million square kilometers in one region of the world is not as easy or difficult to conquer or rule over as 1 million somewhere else. As for the equivalent in million square miles is 0.24%. Of the world would be 0.46. That's excluding Antarctica. Capital was Danangombe. The government was an absolute monarchy. The common languages was Shona or Karanga. The religion was musicism, but it's not related to music necessarily, as to my understanding. The population from 100 to 200,000. As for the further history, the conquest of Butua was in 1660, and the surrender of Tawachipi was in 1866. In the top left, we have an image of the bird of Zimbabwe, which is a symbol that doesn't necessarily come from this Rozvi Empire period, but it was a symbol that existed for the Zimbabwean region before. There was no images I was able to find for Changamire Dombo. As for these images here, we have some of the famous rock building, as we've seen, or stone building, and the ruins of the capital, Danangombe, This is from a website of Isaac Samuel in the History of the Rozvi Kingdom from 1680 to 1830, which is part of his African History Extra. He has a Patreon, and thank you, Isaac Samuel, for these images. I hope you aren't upset that I use them, and I hope I give you some good credit here. And as well, this map is also from his site as well, so the sources are from him. So here we have the Rozvi Empire here. So the Portuguese Prazos was here, which they also defeated much of the Rozvi Prazos. The African states are in all capitals. The middle, normal, non-capitalized, fully capitalized are trading towns or fairs, and the underlined words are archaeological sites. So you get but a picture of the Rozvi were particularly in this region, and we can see, for example, archaeological sites and etc. So that is the Rozvi Empire and Changamire Dombo. As for the Maratha Confederacy, so the Maratha Confederation, also known as the Maratha Empire, as we said, we use these terms loosely, but this is often referred to as empires, and it's better to cover more than less, and I think this one is, if we want to exclude some from the list of empires, I don't think this would be one of them. Despite often being referred to as the Maratha Confederation, it is often, equally, almost as frequently, referred to as the Maratha Empire, or the Maratha Confederacy as well. Was a formidable power in India that emerged in the 17th century, and a pivotal role in the decline of the Mughal Empire, which is an important empire we also previously covered. Another important, perhaps, discussion is the difference between a confederation and a federation, which is a discussion in the Federalist Papers, one of my favorite writings of all time. And it's just so even a federation, there's in between a federation and then perhaps empire in terms of centralization, but nonetheless, often this is referred to as an empire, and we use the term loosely. The Maratha Confederation was a loose alliance of several chieftains who ruled over different regions but were united by common interests and cultural ties. Therefore, we seek to find a history of the rise and fall of the Maratha Empire or Confederation. So the Maratha Confederation, for some further background information, was an early modern polity in the Indian subcontinent. It comprised of the realms of the Peshwa, who was essentially like the prime minister in many ways, or the second in command under the leader, the Chhatrapati, and it was the Peshwa had and as well 4 independent Maratha states who were often subordinate to the realms of the Peshwa. And it was established in 1674 with the CE Common Era, with the coronation of Shivaji, who is the leader whom we will highlight as the Maratha Chhatrapati, and recognized by Emperor Bahadur Shah I as a tributary state in 1707 following a prolonged rebellion. Following this, the Marathas continued to recognize the Mughal Empire, an important empire we covered previously, as a nominal suzerain. Similar to other contemporary Indian entities, though in practice, imperial politics at Delhi were largely influenced by the Marathas between 1737 to 1803, so autonomous enough to have made the list of what we consider to be empires. In many ways, it's an arbitrary distinction of do they rule over a large enough area of land with sufficient autonomy. For more detail, once again, Michael Doyle's book Empires is great, not only definition but ways of thinking about empires. As for origins and rise, so the Shivaji Maharaj and the foundation, so the leader whom we'll highlight. So the origins of the Maratha Confederation can be traced back to the Shivaji Maharaj in 1630 to 1630 to 1680 CE, who was the founder of the Maratha Empire. He was born on the hill fort of Shivneri in Bhosal, Maratha, in present-day Maharashtra. Shivaji was the son of Shahaji Bhosale, a Maratha general who served as one of the Deccan sultanates. So his father was quite powerful, but not necessarily, or not nearly as powerful as his son would become. So maybe on the lesser likely end of the spectrum to become a leader of an empire. or confederation at least. Shivaji's mother, Jijabai, played a significant role in instilling a sense of destiny and independence in him, so perhaps in many ways inspired in part by his mother, as perhaps Alexander the Great, as we've seen. Shivaji began his military career by capturing the Tona fort in 1645, followed by several forts in the western Ghats. His daring tactics and use of guerrilla warfare, important military tactic to often catch the enemy by surprise, as we've seen in many cases, helped to build a robust and resilient military force. By the 1670s, Shivaji had declared himself an independent ruler and was crowned Chhatrapati, or king, in 1674 CE, establishing the Maratha Empire, so considering himself king, and therefore we consider the start date of this confederation. As for the expansion under Shivaji, the Marathas expanded their territory significantly. They captured key forts and territories from the Bijapur Sultanate and the Mughals, including the strategic fort of Raigad, which became the capital as well. Shivaji's administration was marked by efficient governance, a robust military, and promotion of Marathi culture and language. As for post-Shivaji era, so Sambhaji and Rajaram. So after Shivaji's death in 1680, his son Sambhaji, who lived from 1657 to 1689, ascended to the throne. Sambhaji's father's legacy and resistance against the Mughals continued, but it faced more significant challenges than during his father's lifetime. In 1689, he was captured and executed by the Mughals under Emperor Aurangzeb, leading to a period of turmoil, so defeating the king himself, or executing the king. Nonetheless, Shivaji's brother, Rajaram, who lived from 1670 to 1700 CE, then took charge and continued the struggle against the Mughals, so his brother stepped into his place, retaining the autonomy of the empire. Furthermore, Rajaram moved the Maratha capital to Gingji in Tamil Nadu to escape the Mughal persecution. Despite being constantly on the move and under threat, he managed to keep the Maratha resistance alive until his death in 1700. So maybe one way of many ways of defining an empire is if it's willing to fight against other states or fight for its own independence. So even though it had to move, even though it had one king executed, the fact that it's fighting for its own independence at least has a lifeblood of independence, which might make an empire regardless of the size. But I think there should be some cutoffs, but nonetheless, this often is considered an empire, as it is, in my estimation. As for Tarambai and Shahu Maharaj, following Rajaram's death, his widow Tarambai, a female leading the empire at this point, from 1675 to 1761, acted as the regent for her young son Shivaji II. Tarambai was a capable leader and maintained the Maratha resistance against the Mughals, so a very successful female leader here. However, internal conflicts with the Maratha leadership continued to pose challenges. In 1707, after the death of Aurangzeb, Shahu Maharaj, who lived from 1682 to 1749, the grandson of Shivaji, who had been held captive by the Mughals, was released. Shivaji had been held captive by the Mughals and was released, but Shahu's return led to the power struggle with the Tarambai, which eventually resulted in Shahu becoming the recognized leader of the Marathas, so another period of unfortunate decline for the empire. The Confederation. His reign marked the beginning of the era of the Peshwas, who were the prime ministers and de facto rulers of the Maratha Empire. So these prime ministers are second in command, essentially, of the Maratha Confederation, as we alluded to, and we shall discuss more. In 1707, after the death of Aurangzeb, Shahu Maharaj, the grandson of Shivaji, became held captive and was released, and once again this established the formation of the Peshwas, who were the prime ministers and de facto rulers of the Maratha Empire. So as for the Peshwa era, so with the rise of the Peshwas, so Balaji Vishwanath, who lived from 1662 to 1720, or at least this is the period he was kind of prominent, was appointed as the first Peshwa by Shahu in 1713. He played a crucial role in consolidating Maratha power and expanding their influence. His son, Baji Rao I, from 1700 to 1740, succeeded him and is often regarded as one of the greatest military leaders in Indian history. So these Peshwas, who were essentially second prime ministers next to the king, had a very significant place in history as well. Baji Rao I expanded the Maratha influence into central and northern India, establishing Maratha dominance over large parts of the subcontinent. As for expansion and peak, under the leadership of subsequent pashas, notably Balaji Baji Rao, who also known as Nanu Saheb, the Marathas reached the zenith of their power. They established control over vast territories, including parts of present-day Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan. Rajasthan is a place I've been fortunate to visit, but I'd like to visit many of these other regions eventually someday too. Uttar Pradesh and Karnataka. The Maratha Confederation was a decentralized alliance with regional chieftains known as Sardars, in some ways like a satraps, as we've seen in Persian empires, like the Gaywads of Baroda, the Hokars of Indore, and the Scindias of Gawilore, and the Bonslays of Nagpur, among others, playing crucial roles. So in many ways decentralized, but still willing to fight for its own autonomy. But leading to the decline and fall with the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761. So the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761 marked a significant turning point for the Maratha Confederation. The Marathas, led by Sadashivrao Bahu, faced the Afghan forces of Ahmad Shah Abdali. The battle resulted in the catastrophic defeat for the Marathas, with heavy casualties and loss of key leaders. So even their leaders were in the battle, so maybe taking a risk, but maybe they needed to be there. But it was ultimately extremely had a lot of casualties, even especially in the higher realms of leadership. This defeat severely weakened the Maratha Confederation and marked the beginning of the decline. As for internal strife and the British encroachment, so following the defeat at Panipat, the Marathas faced internal strife and succession disputes. The death of the Peshwa Madhav Rao I in 1772 led to a period of instability, perhaps taking advantage of the external pressures. The subsequent Peshwas were unable to maintain the same level of control and unity within the Confederation, so the prime ministers essentially lost much power. Furthermore, the British East India Company, taking advantage of the internal conflicts, gradually expanded their influence into India. The Anglo-Maratha Wars from 1775 to 1818 further weakened the Marathas, and the First Anglo-Maratha War in 1775 to 1782 ended with the Treaty of Salbai, which temporarily halted British expansion but did not resolve the underlying tensions. So there was periods, it was not necessarily linear, but ultimately this British Empire was a formidable force, as we shall cover soon. As for the Second Anglo-Maratha War from 1803 to 1805 resulted in significant territorial losses for the Marathas. The Third Anglo-Maratha War from 1817 to 1818 was the final blow. So three ultimately Anglo-Maratha wars, with the third leading the decisive blow, but all three were quite fatal, leading to the defeat of the Maratha Confederation and the annexation of their territories with the British. It must be noted that they all were of varying lengths, but to at least the first was the longest, then the second and the third was the shortest. So as for the legacy, so despite the eventual fall, the Marathas left a lasting legacy on Indian history. They played a crucial role in the weakening of the Mughal Empire, an important empire we've covered, and delaying the British dominance in India, and perhaps one of the most formidable empires we shall see. The Marathas also contributed to the cultural and political development of the regions they controlled, promoting Marathi language, literature, and administration. Some of these influences, or many of these influences, still exist today. The Maratha Confederation's decentralized structure and military prowess remain significant in the historical narrative of India, still relatively more decentralized than perhaps some of its neighbors, such as China. Their legacy continues to be celebrated in Maharashtra and other parts of India, where figures like Shivaji, whom we highlight, Maharaj, are revered as icons of bravery and statecraft. So very, very important history of the region and important empire or confederation. So once again, a Peshwa is the second highest office of the Maratha Confederacy. It's next in rank and prestige only to that of the Chhatrapati, initially serving as the appointed prime minister in the Maratha kingdom. The office eventually became hereditary after the death of Shahu in 1749, so it became hereditary as well. So as to highlight a specific leader, we have Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. So the most important ruler, perhaps, of the Maratha Confederation is often considered to be Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, the founder of the Maratha Empire. His leadership, vision, and military prowess were instrumental in establishing the Maratha state, which later eventually evolved into a powerful confederation. Therefore, we seek to find a biography of his life. But first, for some background information, so Shivaji was born on 19th of February in 1630 and died on the 3rd of April 1680. He was an Indian ruler and a member of the Bonzi dynasty, so of a dynasty, but not a dynasty ruling a confederation, as he would come to do. Shivaji carved out his own independent kingdom from the declining Adil Shahi Sultanate of Bijapur, and formed the genesis of the Maratha Confederacy. In 1674, he was formally crowned the Chhatrapati of the realm of the Raigad fort, so forming his own state. We shall see very much like the leader whom he has been paired with in this episode. As for his early life, so with his birth and family background, so Shivaji Bhosale, which is his dynasty, later known as Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, was born on the 19th of February 1630 in the hill fort of Shivneri, located in present-day Maharashtra, India. He was the son of Shahaji Bhosale, who was a Maratha general who served the Deccan Sultanates, and Jinjabai, a woman of strong character and deep religious faith, who had a strong influence on his life, and religious faith as well. Shivaji's early life was influenced by the tales of valor and devotion narrated by his mother, so his mother very much inspired him to greatness, as well as the teachings of the spiritual guru, Daoji Kondeo. So his mother gave him also a great teacher to engage in religious teachings as well, which is a very important part of his life, but not necessarily all leaders of empires we've covered. As further for his education and early influences, so Shivaji was trained in the art of warfare, administration, and statecraft from a young age, so it'd be great from a dynasty, a great education, perhaps the best education he could get, but not necessarily education expecting the role he would ultimately have. He was well versed in the Hindu epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, which instilled in him a sense of justice, duty, and righteousness, so a lover of literature, in fact. The rugged terrain of the Western Ghats, where he grew up, also shaped his skills in guerrilla warfare and his understanding of fort architecture, so very, very quite a polymath, an architect, warfare, religion, and even literature as well, so very, very fascinating, nuanced individual. As for his rise to power, starting with this early military campaign. So Shivaji's military career began in 1645 at the age of 15, so starting very young as well, when he captured the Torna fort from the Bijapur Sultanate. This audacious move set the stage for future conquests of his and the Confederation. He continued to seize several other forts, including Chakan, Kondada, later renamed Singahad, and Purandar, establishing his control over the Mabal region. As for his conflicts with the Bijapur Sultanate, Shivaji's growing power alarmed the Bijapur Sultanate, which sent its general Afzal Khan to subdue him in 1659. Shivaji clearly outmaneuvered, however, this Afzal Khan, killing him in a dramatic encounter at the Patrapad fort. This victory significantly boosted Shivaji's reputation among his followers, so in many ways, as perhaps in Plutarch's Parallel Lives, we see not only is it important to win the battle, but to make a big show of it also leads to the inspiration that may influence further battles. As for his establishment of the Maratha Empire, so his coronation and administration, so in 1674, Shivaji was formally crowned Chhatrapati, or king, at the Raigad fort, where his victory was, marking the foundation of the Maratha Empire. His coronation was a grand event symbolizing the emergence of the sovereign Hindu kingdom in the Deccan. So sovereignty, if it is a king, that is also an indication that at least has asserting its autonomy, because a king has necessarily wields no authority, at least they say. Or maybe they might not do so in their actions, however. As for Shivaji, established a robust administrative system based on the merit and efficiency. He divided the kingdom into various provinces, as we see in, for example, the Persian Empire, one of the earliest manifestations of this, or satrapies. And these provinces were known as Swarajya, and implemented and appointed capable officers to manage them, which is a form of centralization like the satraps. His Ashtrapadhan, or Council of 8 Ministers, all included experts in various fields, so ensuring effective governance, which is a common theme for a king to have a set of advisors, and very much important. Even more so is to what degree do they listen to these advisors, or what powers do these advisors have. As for military strategies and expansion, Shivaji's military tactics were revolutionary for his time. He employed guerrilla warfare using rugged terrain to his advantage and executed swift and surprise attacks on his enemies. As mentioned, he built a strong navy to protect the Konkan coast and launched naval expeditions against the cities of Janjira, the Portuguese, and the British as well. So very, very formidable in terms of even some of these colonial empires that we covered and will cover more are its very significant feat. His network of forts, not to mention those within the subcontinent as well. His network of forts numbering over 300, so they had to build forts and establish them, and those are effective in battle. They might have horses, but if they have walls, it's very difficult. Was strategically placed to control key trade routes and defend his territories, and so 300 is a very large number of forts, as anyone can imagine. As for his conflict with the Mughals, so his encounters with Aurangzeb, so Shivaji's rising power inevitably led to conflicts with the Mughal Empire. In 1660, he clashed with the Mughal forces led by Shaista Khan, Aurangzeb's uncle. Shivaji conducted a daring night raid on Shaista Khan's camp in Pune, wounding him and killing many of his soldiers, so a significant blow directly to the family of the emperor of the Mughal Empire. This audacious attack forced Shaista Khan to retreat, so very, very insulting, if anything. As for, or not necessarily insulting, but or an achievement, or nonetheless a physical blow to the Mughal Empire and family. As for his Treaty of Purandar and subsequent events, in 1665, Shivaji formed a formidable Mughal force faced a formidable Mughal force under Raja Jai Singh I in Amber. After a series of battles, Shivaji agreed to the Treaty of Purandar, ceding 23 forts to the Mughals and visiting the Mughal court in Agra. So conceding a 23, they had over 300 forts, so perhaps not quite less than 10%, but nonetheless a significant defeat, and maybe foreshadowing the further conflicts with the Mughal Empire going forward. And during his visit in 1666, he felt humiliated by Aurangzeb's treatment and orchestrated a daring escape, returning to Deccan to resume his campaigns, so humiliated by this other emperor. As for his later years and legacy, with his consolidation and power, in the later years, Shivaji focused on consolidating and expanding his empire. He launched successful campaigns in the Karnataka region, capturing important forts and territories. His administration continued to strengthen with reforms in revenue collection, justice, and military organization. As for his death and succession, Shivaji Maharaj passed away on April 3rd, 1680 at the Raigad fort, the famous fort, where he was coronated, for example. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy endured through his successors to differing levels of success, and the Maratha Confederation more broadly. Shivaji's eldest son, Shambhaji, succeeded him, so his son had a more likely coming to power than him, but the empire faced challenges from internal conflicts and external threats, as we have seen. As for his enduring legacy, with his cultural and political impact, so Shivaji Maharaj is revered as a symbol of Maratha pride, valor, and resistance against oppression. His emphasis on Hindu cultural revival, justice, and good governance left a lasting impact on the region. He is celebrated for his visionary leadership, strategic acumen, and commitment to his people. As for his influence on future generations, Shivaji's legacy continued to inspire future generations of Marathas, who played a crucial role in shaping the history of India even to this day. In terms of influence, the Maratha Confederation, under the leadership of the Peshwas, emerged as a dominant power in the 18th century, challenging the Mughal Empire and delaying British colonization. Shivaji Maharaj's life and achievements remain a source of inspiration and pride for millions of people in India to this day and around the world. His vision of strong, independent, and culturally vibrant Maratha state continues to resonate in contemporary times. It still, to some degree, sees itself having a distinct identity, Maratha identity. So as for the content of this slide of this fascinating emperor and leader, in my opinion, so the title we have is Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and the Maratha Confederation, also known as the Maratha Empire. It was comprised of realms of Peshwa, which is the governor or prime minister, but ultimately became a hereditary role as well, and the four major Maratha states, often subordinate to the former. The significant leader was Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, the Empire Maratha Confederacy. The period was from 1674 to 1818 CE, Common Era, the modern location within the borders of India. Million square kilometers would be 2.5, which is not the largest we've had, but over double the size of our average largest empires. And it's also a very populated region since the earliest Indus Valley civilizations. There's been civilizations here too, so not an easy area to conquer or to endeavor to rule over. Million square kilometers would be 0.97, and percent of the world would be 1.89%, excluding Antarctica. Capital, it would be Raigad. From 1674 to 1708 was the de jure, or the legal capital. The Jinji was the capital from 1691 to 1698 as the de facto capital. Satara was the capital as well from 1708 to 1818, and Pune was the capital from 1728 to 1818 for the Peshwa's seat. The government was an absolute monarchy from 1674 to 1731, and it was a federal oligarchy from 1731 to 1818. The common languages include Marathi, which was the court language, and the language of literature. And it was also Sanskrit was another prominent religious language within the region. The religion was Hinduism, was the state religion, but there were other South Asian religions were within this region, this large region. And the population would be between 15 to 25 billion, smaller than the population within these regions today within India, but much larger than most of the empires, the vast majority of empires we've covered so far, in part because of the time in history through technological developments, in part because of their geographical size, and in part due to the fertility of the region as well. And in part due to their own sophistication and technology in terms of producing food, for example. In the top left, we have a portrait of Shivaji produced in approximately the 1680s, found in the British Museum. So I've been to the British Museum, but I didn't notice this, so as I do learn more, I will endeavor to go back to these places. To the right of that, we have the flag of the Maratha Confederacy, and to the right of that, we have the royal seal of Shivaji I. I'd be fascinated to find out what that reads for those who can read the Sanskrit characters. I know a few, but not enough. Even if I could read it, the letters, which I can't do all of, I wouldn't even know what it means necessarily, or certainly not. But nonetheless, I'm endeavoring to learn. As for to the right of that, was preceded by the Mughal Empire, which we covered, and the Bijapur Sultanate, and it was succeeded by the company rule in India, such as the British India Company, etc. As for the history, the coronation of Shivaji was on the 6th of June, 1674. The Deccan Wars were from 1680 to 1707. The recognition of Shahu I as the legitimate ruler by Badapur Shah was in 1707. The appointment of Balaji Vishwanath as the hereditary Peshwa was in 1713, a significant change in terms of the role of the prime minister in their succession. The Treaty of Bhopal was from 1737, perhaps also that led to some succession disputes by making it hereditary. The Third Anglo-Maratha War was from 1817 to 1819, the last of the three Anglo-Maratha Wars, and the dissolution of the Maratha Confederacy was in 1818. Below that, we have the image of a Peshwa Maharao II in his court in 1790. So we can see the beautiful architecture within the court, and during the Second Anglo-Maratha War, so as well as later period during its time in a very dramatic period in its history. And to the right of that, we have the Maratha Confederacy and controlled regions. The Battle of Assaye during the Second Anglo-Maratha War as well. And into the left, they're actually concluding a treaty with the British. So you can see them interacting as well through battle and through negotiations to differing degrees of success. And in the top right, we have a map of the Maratha Confederacy and the controlled regions in 1716 near its peak, where all the yellow territory, this very massive region, would be coast to coast from Bay of Bengal to the Indian Ocean. Massive yellow region would be the Maratha Confederacy, but also in many ways exposed to many threats, such as the Mughal threat and the British colonial empire. So as for a comparison between the two fascinating opinion leaders, Changamire Dombo of the Rozvi Empire and Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj of the Maratha Empire. So Changamire Dombo of the Rozvi Empire and Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj of the Maratha Empire were both influential leaders who established significant pre-colonial empires in Africa and India, respectively. Their lives and achievements share some similarities, as we shall see, but have distinct differences. Here's a detailed here we will endeavor to learn more about them through their differences. So as for some of their similarities, so as founders of the empires, so Changamire Dombo, so they're both founders of empires, as we shall see. So Changamire Dombo founded the Rozvi Empire in present-day Zimbabwe, consolidating various Shona-speaking groups and territories, so consolidating diverse groups of people, forming a new state, and also splitting off from the previous state as well. Shivaji Maharaj founded the Maratha Empire in western India, unifying various Maratha clans and regions, so both unifying diverse sets of people, which is one way of defining an empire as well, diverse peoples, but not the only way. But nonetheless, both of them are founders of empires, and also have the first title, first their names as well. As for both of the similarities as military leaders, so both leaders were exceptional military strategists, where Changamire Dombo utilized guerrilla warfare and traditional Nguni fighting techniques with a spear and a cowhide shield, including the use of the cowhide shields and short stabbing spears. As for Shivaji Maharaj, employed guerrilla warfare as well, using significant cavalry raids and strategic use of forts, and developed strong navy. So many different ways: navy, forts, spear and shield. So very different war techniques. It would be interesting to see how they would have fared if they went against each other. But nonetheless, both innovative in many different respects, but both innovative similarly. As for the resistance against foreign powers, so both resistant foreign dominance and played crucial roles in their respective regions. So, for example, the Portuguese and the British, particularly, and also the Mughal Empire as well, and other formidable forces within the Zimbabwe region as well. The Changamire Dombo fought the power against the Portuguese colonial forces, defeating them decisively at the Battle of Mongwe and expelling them from the interior regions of southern Africa. As for Shivaji Maharaj, resisted the Mughal expansion under Aurangzeb and clashed with the Bijapur Sultanate. Furthermore, he conducted daring raids and escapes, such as the attack on the Shaista Khan, the uncle of the emperor of the Mughal Empire, and his escape from Agra when he felt shame. So, maybe Shivaji was, maybe more. Their threat was the Mughal Empire had more success against him, but he still didn't give away. Whereas Changamire Dombo the first was maybe more decisively successful, at least during his own lifetime, whereas Shivaji was even captured and was even shamed by this other emperor. So different lives they have in that regards. As for their administrative skills, so both established effective administrative systems to govern their empires. Changamire Dombo created a centralized state with regional governors, ensuring efficient governance and loyalty. As for Shivaji Maharaj, implemented a decentralized administration with Ashtradapan, which is the council of 8 ministers overseeing various aspects of governance. So both of them, maybe the Shivaji Maharaj they had a more centralized system by implementing these governors, but Changamire Dombo I also kind of had in many ways these governors as well, but it was less explicit at their development and also led more through loyalty than necessarily having these declared structures as well, but both forms of centralization. As for their cultural impact, both leaders promoted their indigenous cultures and traditions, where Changamire Dombo continued the stone-building traditions of the great Zimbabwe civilization, contributing to the region's architectural heritage. As for Shivaji, Maharaj promoted Marathi language, literature, and culture, fostering a sense of identity and pride to the region's architectural heritage. So both very much dedicated to architecture, whereas, however, Changamire Dombo maybe was continuing the great Zimbabwe stone structures. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj I was sort of maybe building new forts, so not necessarily building upon existing as much. As for some of their differences, besides those we've mentioned, starting with their geopolitical context. So Changamire Dombo operated in the context of southern Africa, dealing primarily with the Portuguese and regional African powers. Shivaji Maharaj operated in the Indian subcontinent, dealing primarily with the Mughal Empire, the Bijapur Sultanate, and the European colonial powers such as the Portuguese and the British. So maybe sort of just different in that regards, but they both dealt with the Portuguese, for example. As for their scale and influence, the Changamire Dombo, the Rozvi Empire, through significant territorial expansion and influence, did not reach the same level of territorial expansion and influence as the Maratha Empire. So a little bit smaller, but the regions are different, and for example, technologies are different. Their access to military equipment or weapons are different as well. But nonetheless, the scale is different in that but the Confederacy was larger, but maybe it was looser, however. So, as for their legacy and succession, Changamire Dombo, his successors continued to defend the Rozvi Empire, but faced challenges from internal strife and external pressure, such as the rise of the Zulu Empire and the Ndebele invasions. As for Shivaji Maharaj, his successors, including his son Sambhaji and later the Peshwas, expanded the Maratha Empire, making a dominant power in India until the British conquest. So both of them, so things continued to improve to some degree after them, with periods of rise and fall, but ultimately both of their empires do not exist to this day. As for the end of their rule for Changamire Dombo, the exact details of his death are less documented, but his empire faced significant challenges and eventual decline in the 19th century, so his life is less documented. Whereas Shivaji Maharaj passed away in 1680, but his empire continued to grow under his successors until it faced his decline due to British colonization and internal conflict, so maybe more similar in this regard as well. Thus, Changamire Dombo and the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj were both visionary leaders who founded influential empires through military prowess, administrative acumen, and cultural promotion. While they operated in different regions and contexts, their legacies and as defenders of their people and cultures, and perhaps through creating a state, through seeking autonomy and splitting off and then uniting people, and remain as enduring symbols of resistance and statecraft in Zimbabwe and Mozambique and India, respectively. So, thank you very, very much for watching this episode of Ages of Empires on what I believe to be two very fascinating empires and two fascinating leaders. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. This is Cashcroft TV, and I'd be very, very grateful if you continue to support. Thank you so much.